Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Colts Cover-2 podcast. I am IndyStar Colts insider Jim Ayello, and I am joined by a man with the exact same title as me. His name is Joel A. Erickson, however. And we were thinking about continuing, or actually doing an entire segment and podcast on white running backs, but instead we'll talk about the Colts, I guess. I mean, that's I think that deserves some airtime. Peyton Hillis and Mike Allstott, but
I don't know if it does.
Are you sure?
Yeah,
I mean, it's a rare breed. It's a rare breed.
I don't know if we can. I don't know if we could just do it on chunky running backs because then I can throw in Ron Dane.
Oh, that's a good one.
And Mike Tolbert, everyone's favorite.
I do like Mike Tolbert.
Mike Tolbert is the Bartolo Colon of NFL.
That career lasted so long too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he legitimately played running back. So
yeah, he did. Peyton Hillis' career did not last as long as Mike Tolbert's, I'm fairly certain. You just looked up his numbers. It was like
Peyton Hillis was in the league for 7 years.
It was 7 years?
Yeah.
Man. So yeah, that's the podcast you could have listened to. Instead, what we're going to talk about is our predictions for the Colts season.
But you can't because the Colts don't have any chunky running backs, so there's nothing to compare them.
No, they're all very slim. Jordan, probably the biggest guy in the room. Wilkins or Marlon or Jonathan, I guess. I haven't seen Jonathan in a while.
Maybe Jonathan Williams.
Okay.
But yeah, they're more of the in between, I'd say.
Right.
They're not slight, but they're just kind of in between.
Naheem is slight. The other three guys are.
Well, like Naheem's short, but if you ever stood next to Naheem,
oh yeah,
he's not built like I'm trying to think of like
Work Done.
Yeah, there's a good one like Work Done or somebody like that.
Yeah.
Who's kind of more. Naheem's kind of built like Darren Sproles, where like they're real short, but they're real stout.
Yeah, I wouldn't get in a fight with Naheem Hines. I'd lose real fast.
But yeah, anyway, this podcast has gotten off to a very strange
I think it's a great start. I think this is very interesting. No, we're going to talk about predictions. We're going to talk about quarterbacks because there's like new ones in the building and old ones are gone, not just Andrew Luck. And older ones are here now. It's just there's a lot going on in quarterback news. I tweeted it out. It's like a million different things ever since Andrew Luck retired. So we'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about the Chargers because there's actually football this week. I mean, literally we're recording this on
Real
Wednesday.
Football.
There's a game tomorrow, Bears-Packers, and then the Colts play on Sunday.
As T.Y. Hilton put it, they can't keep me off the field anymore.
Yep, that's true. There's no reason to. I don't know why. Who was trying to stop T.Y. Hilton?
Well, he didn't play during the preseason. He was
that's
talking
true.
about his lack of preseason reps.
You're right.
He was talking about his lack of preseason reps, and he was saying they can't keep me off the field anymore.
Read between the lines. I wasn't there for that interview, so that's good stuff from T.Y. Okay, so let's start with your predictions because you were just. Is it bullish or bearish? I always mix these up. Which one's excited? Which one means you're...
I think bull is the right one.
Bull? You're bullish.
But...
I'm a wordsmith.
So, I think it's important to start out by saying I don't like doing predictions for the whole season.
We forced you.
Sorry to my employers. I did it anyway. But the reason I don't is because the way teams look now isn't what they're going to look like halfway through the regular season.
Right.
And that's where it gets hard. We're picking game by game, and we're picking with incomplete information. I mean, to some degree, we know what these teams were last year, but we don't know what they're going to be this year. That's sort of the whole thing that makes the NFL great.
Yeah.
Is you don't know what teams are going to be year over year. And so that makes it hard to pick a game that's going to happen in November. That makes it hard to pick a game that's in November when they're going to look different. Some of these teams are not going to look the same down the road. That being said, when you go game by game, I don't necessarily know that I love the Colts without Andrew Luck as much as it seems like I do.
Yeah, I was going to call you a huge homer because you picked him to go
10-6.
10-6.
Mm-hmm.
When you picked, and what was the record last year with Andrew Luck?
10-6.
Okay, this is interesting then.
It's more that I don't like a lot of their opponents. I don't. Tennessee is sort of confounding to me.
Agree.
I don't really understand how they win 9 games every year.
Yeah, if they win 4 this year, I'd be like, yeah, all right.
With their quarterback situation and just kind of a lack of like front. I mean, Kevin Byard's really good, but just like a lack of like frontline top playmakers at really any spot. Houston, I think they lost a lot with Jadeveon Clowney. I don't think it's just the pass rush. I think like their run defense was very good last year, and he had a big role in it. And now he's gone. And Lamar Miller is going to hurt them because they want to run the football. They were one of the top 10 teams in terms of carries last year. Carlos Hyde is not the player he was in San Francisco anymore. He's not anywhere close to that.
That's the nicest thing you said about Carlos Hyde in the last few days.
Well, we're in public.
He's not as good as he used to be. Is the nicest thing you said about Carlos Hyde.
I think what I've been saying is something along the lines of he's basically a league average running back, which is why 2 teams last year got him and then didn't use him or cut him or whatever. I can't remember exactly how it happened. So I don't like the Texans for that reason. They've got some big holes, I think, now.
Yeah.
And the Jaguars, I like the Jaguars defense, even without Telvin Smith. I do. But if you look at the offense, they've got Nick Foles now, but he doesn't really have anything around him.
Do you think Leonard Fournette has to stay healthy? That's pretty much...
Leonard Fournette has to stay healthy, but even when he's been healthy, he's not... For me, he's not like an Ezekiel Elliott or a Saquon Barkley or somebody like that who can sort of change your fortunes on offense. Yes, it will go through him.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about matchups against the Colts, like those are the kind of teams that the Colts feasted on last year.
Yeah.
So that's just the AFC South. So then, Denver, I feel like's got issues.
Yep.
Oakland. Miami clearly is probably not even trying to win.
I wrote the tank for Tua is a thing already.
Yeah, they're not even trying to win. Oakland's defense still has no pass rush.
Antonio Brown's making noise again.
Yay. Yeah, and who knows what's going on there. Carolina is another team almost like Tennessee that they're always pretty good and competitive, but for some reason, like sometimes it's hard to understand why. I think, not that I'm saying that Cam Newton's Marcus Mariota. Like, Cam Newton's much better than Marcus Mariota, but he's always banged up, especially by the time he gets to the end of the season when the Colts play him.
Your point about how these teams change, like especially halfway through the season, is to me when I was trying to predict the Carolina game in December, I was like, well, it just all depends on if Cam's healthy.
Yeah, 100%. It 100% depends on if Cam's healthy. And that's a team that they get pass rush, but I don't necessarily know who their frontline guy is anymore.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think just in general, I think Carolina might be in for a little bit of a drop off this year.
Oh, you good?
We have some technical issues. That's what this is coming from. I'm trying to think of who else is on there. I don't like Tampa Bay's defense.
Nope.
And Jameis Winston. I know Bruce Arians is there, but he's still Jameis Winston.
I'm gonna pull it up so you don't have to guess. But you had him lose. Wait, so how did you have him in the division? Are you like 5-1?
4-2.
Oh, so both losses to the Texans then?
No, I have them losing to Jacksonville in the season finale. Because for some reason when the Colts go down to Jacksonville, bad things happen. And the Jacksonville did have more of a hold on the Colts offense last year than any other defense did. So I picked them in like a really low game, low scoring game. So I think 4-2, but there's just a lot of teams I don't really like. I think they have major holes, and I understand as we sort of transition to the Colts.
Yeah.
Like, I understand that there's a lot of question marks with Jacoby Brissett, but the rest of the roster, I feel like there's less questions than there have been in a while, and I think that helps them in these games against these imperfect, flawed teams. Quarterback makes the difference a lot of times, but a quarterback really makes the difference when you get in these games against these big-time teams. I think the only team I have them beating with one of those quarterbacks is Atlanta.
Yeah, so you have them beating Atlanta, which I don't. But yeah, you have them beating Atlanta early in the season, which I think would be a pretty big statement win because I know it's at home, but that'd be a big win.
Yeah, and that one I don't feel like 100% great on that pick. I think the Falcons could be really good.
Yeah,
but the Falcons aren't really built to play. If the Colts' offensive line is what it was last year in terms of running the ball, the Falcons' defense isn't really built to play that way. Grady Jarrett is built to play that way, but the rest of it is more of a small speed.
Yeah, they're fast.
They're fast, and I think you can run straight at them. So that's kind of where I was thinking on that. But that one, I admittedly like Atlanta a lot. It just feels like a game that the matchup might not be the perfect one for them.
Okay, so let me ask you: 10-6, is that enough to win this division?
Yeah, I think so.
Will it win the division?
I don't know about will, but I think it's definitely possible. I mean, we just went through how I don't like anybody else in the division.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's what I'm wondering. Do you see Houston finishing below 9-7, 8-8? Where are you at? Because I think that, to me,
I think all these teams are kind of going to be in that 6-10 to 10-6 range.
Okay, that's a big range.
To me, it's not, because like I feel like it's not bad enough that you're like necessarily blowing everything up, and it's not good enough that you're a clear Super Bowl contender.
Well, I'll tell you this: if Houston goes 6-10, Bill O'Brien will not be the coach there / GM.
That's a good point. That's a good point. So like, but that kind of like middling to bad is kind of sort of where I have the South. There's a lot of holes on all these teams.
Interesting. I like Houston more than I think you do. I think the defense is still going to be fine. I like that. Again, don't get me. Do I like the Laramie Tunsil trade? No. Do I like Laramie Tunsil's fit on that team? 100% yes, I do. I think that's going to be huge for Deshaun Watson, and that receiving core is legit. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins, Will Fuller. I actually like Kenny Stills quite a bit. Kiki Kuti had a really good game against the Colts here last year, and a lot of people are expecting big things from him. I kind of like what that offense is going to be able to do, and I don't know how you feel about Deshaun Watson, but I think that guy with the right breaks is MVP candidate.
I don't think he's quite that good.
Okay.
But because they haven't, for whatever, and it might just be Bill O'Brien trying to hold him back. That's possible. But they haven't put the game on him. They tried to run the ball a lot. My biggest thing with the Tunsil trade is they got one tackle.
Yeah.
I can't remember who all they signed or everything, but you need more than just one left tackle. And my best example of that is that Joe Thomas was the left tackle in Cleveland for 11 years, and their lines were still awful.
Hey, you don't have to look outside of Indianapolis. They had Costanzo, and the line was still terrible.
Yeah,
Costanzo's a good player.
You can have a really great player on that blind side and have a bad line, and I think they're gonna still have some issues there.
Okay.
They wouldn't have traded for Laramie Tunsil if their draft picks had panned out, so that means they might take a little while to get going. And I don't know, that secondary, the Houston secondary, it just doesn't grab me. They don't have Tyrann Mathieu anymore. I'm struggling at the moment, actually, to kind of like come up with. I know they got Bradley Roby.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But I'm struggling to come up with who they had, and it's not a whole lot.
Kareem still there? Kareem Jackson?
I think so. I can't remember for sure.
We're clearly in preseason form here, folks. We will know the rosters better soon.
But I just, that secondary doesn't grab me.
No, yeah.
Obviously you love J.J. Watt.
Yeah.
But taking Clowney off hurts. And
Whitley Merciless is a decent player. He's not.
Who's been down a little bit lately.
Yeah, and he's not Clowney. Mm-hmm. And he definitely benefited from playing across from a guy like Clowney for sure.
So I don't know. I think and I could be wrong. Bill O'Brien has done a lot with, well, not a lot, but he's won the division with less.
Yeah.
Before, and they still have a lot of top talent. But my thing with the Texans has always been their like 6 or 7 best players are fantastic.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the roster isn't really that deep. It hasn't been in the past.
I don't think that's like they almost that trade, the Laramie Tunsil trade, almost speaks to like they're just going to go like I don't want to call these guys scrubs. They're not scrubs, but it's like a stars and scrubs approach. You know what I mean? Like we're going to have elite quarterback, elite receivers, elite defensive ends. Until they traded Clowney, and elite, and then we'll just fill in the rest. We'll pay these guys, and then we'll fill in the rest around it. And that's kind of what the Tunsil thing was. We're going to give up our picks, give up whatever we need to give up. Let's get an elite left tackle.
Yeah, and I do think the depth matters. I think the team that exemplifies that best is the Patriots. The Patriots are a team, we talk about it all the time. I think everybody talks about it. This isn't original to me or this beat or anything. That team's won 6 Super Bowls and maybe produced like 3 Hall of Famers.
Yeah.
And that's crazy. It's crazy for a team to be that successful and only have 2 or 3 guys who seem like bona fide Hall of Fame types. And it's because it's not just, it's partially it's how they use their depth. Partially it's that they don't ask players to do things they're not good at. Mm-hmm. But also it's just sort of like that they have a lot of answers. And it feels like it's hard to tell. We don't know. I'll agree with people who are on the naysaying side. But it feels like the Colts have answers down through the roster.
Yeah. No, and that's actually one of the other stories that we wrote this week was the depth chart. And going through the depth chart, and I think Greg Doyle, our colleague, wrote that this is probably one of the deepest teams that he's covered since he's been here. And you looked through it before it published. And you know the depth chart backwards and forwards. There isn't a hole I wouldn't say they're strong or elite everywhere, but there's no hole on this team, I don't think.
No, there's no spot that you're going, I don't know what they're going to get there.
Right.
And the other thing is the NFL sort of spoke on it. That's the thing about depth is the NFL sort of decides for you what your depth is. And the Colts had 2 trades. They had 2 guys picked up on waivers.
So you got Bame and Harrison were trades.
Bame and Harrison were trades, and then Chris Milton and Matthias Farley were picked up on. Well, Matthias Farley wasn't picked up on waivers. He was signed later, but he's on a 53-man roster.
He was cut by the Colts essentially so that he could find a team. So this is the same situation.
So that's 4. I mean, that's a big number for you to lose 4 guys off your 90-man and end up playing elsewhere. And then there's another one, and this sort of isn't a perfect this isn't necessarily a perfect way to look at it, but I think it is indicative. Gary Green, the 6th-round pick from Mississippi State, had the opportunity to come back to Indianapolis and decided not to because he couldn't see a path to the active roster at defensive end.
Right. They're loaded.
And that's a position that was thin last year. Just last year, they had to move Tyquan Lewis out of the spot they wanted him to play.
Yeah.
To play defensive end. And I think that starts to get pretty indicative. If you throw it depends on how you want to do it. If you want to throw Hassan Ridgeway in there, they traded him during the draft, and he's on a 53-man roster.
True. So
they're getting there. They're starting to get there in terms of guys that are not good enough to make this roster are good enough to make other people's rosters. And I don't think I can't see a real hole anywhere. I think that they might be in a little bit of trouble if Marlon Mack goes down.
Okay, yeah, they don't necessarily have the guy who does everything that Marlon does.
Right.
Or at least
and last year, we saw last year that they really struggled when he wasn't in there.
Yes.
But you know, if they get some improvement there. So I think that maybe beyond Marlon, but when he's in there, I think I probably like Marlon Mack more than most people do. I don't really understand why people keep trying to give the Colts running backs because I think Marlon Mack's really good. I know he's missed some games and stuff like that, but when he's on the field, he's very, very good. And so I guess I don't see that as a big an issue as some people do.
So you're going to endorse my. You should. I don't know if you saw this because I know you're a giant gambling guy, and I led my gambling.
Spoiler alert to the readers: I almost don't know what it is.
We're gonna educate Joel as we go along the season on how you can set yourself up for life by gambling on the NFL. His face right now.
Betting on the NFL is a sucker's game. I just want to put that out there.
You will be putting it out there, I believe, 16 times a week this year.
If you lose your money, blame Jim, not me.
And to be perfectly transparent, I am not allowed to bet on the NFL, so I cannot put my money where my mouth is. So I'm going to be happy for you guys to do it for me, which is really kind of you guys to cash in on all my good bets, including to get back to what the hell we were talking about. Marlon Mack leading the NFL in rushing. He actually has pretty good odds on that. And when I took this to you, you didn't understand what the odds were, but you didn't.
That's true.
You did say that doesn't sound like a crazy bet to me. Marlon Mack with Frank Reich declaring I want to be a top 5 rushing team with this offensive line that they got, and nobody wants to tell me this. I asked her on the locker room today. Do you think the running game is going to take on added importance with Jacoby Brissett? They all say no. I think, of course, yes. This has to be the running game is going to take on a bigger role in this offense. I think there's legitimate reasons to believe that Marlon Mack is talented enough and has the supporting cast around him and the play callers that will give him enough opportunities to make this happen.
Well, and just from a numbers standpoint, if Marlon Mack had been healthy for all 16 games last year, he would have had his average yards per game would have ended up being over 1,500 yards. So it's not just that he could do it. We've seen him run at that level.
Yep.
Now, obviously, staying healthy is tough. It's running back. Running back is a very difficult position to stay healthy at in the NFL, and honestly in college or high school either. But he's very talented. I really like his burst. I really like his vision. I like the way he sets up blocks. And I think that anybody who kind of looks at the running back situation and thinks, oh, they're not very good, I just don't think they've watched Marlon Mack.
I'll say this. I think Melvin Gordon's out there available via trade. I don't think Chris Ballard's making that call.
Yeah, and I think Melvin Gordon might be a little overblown. And I say that as somebody who likes Melvin Gordon. I don't necessarily think Melvin Gordon is on the level of like Ezekiel Elliott or Saquon Barkley or somebody like that.
Okay.
Just because he hasn't shown it. And also, before any Colts fan tweets at us, if you're looking for somebody who gets hurt less than Marlon Mack, it's not Melvin.
It's not Melvin Gordon.
Melvin Gordon gets hurt every year.
Also played 12 games last year, 13 maybe.
Melvin Gordon gets hurt every single year. So just keep that in mind. Running backs miss games.
Keeping running backs healthy is hard. And to be fair to Marlon, even last year, I don't know how we got talking about this. This is interesting, though. But he when he was healthy, he was getting 16 carries a game. That's a lot.
Yeah, he's the lead guy.
Yeah.
He's the lead
He's
guy.
a workhorse guy, though. And there aren't that many of those guys in the NFL. So, fantasy tips. But no, I mean, he's really just they're using him like a workhorse. And I know, and Frank Reich, who I asked about this today, really hasn't worked in a lot of systems with a workhorse back like this. So it's kind of interesting to watch that develop.
No, and that's going back to what I said earlier. That's why I think that maybe if he goes down, I don't know if you're going to get the same production from Jonathan Williams and Jordan Wilkins that you would from Marlon Mack. So maybe there's a little bit of a thin quality there.
Okay. Everywhere else, though. I wanted you to talk about the offensive line because we all know they have a great starting lineup. Mm-hmm. 4 guys that I think are probably Pro Bowlers, or could be Pro Bowlers, I should say. But behind them, they've only elected to keep 3 more offensive linemen. 8 is a little bit it's thin.
It's not, though.
You don't think so?
No, it's thin for what Ballard has done here in the past, but it's not if you look at the rest of the rosters around the league.
Okay, explain.
I've covered teams where they only had 7 guys. I know that there's a lot of teams that go 8. If you start looking, I mean, you can go 9 or 10, but 8 is kind of like the midpoint number.
Okay.
Sort of the average number. And the reason they can go with 8 is that Joe Haig plays tackle, LaRaven Clark plays tackle. So you have 2 backup tackles. Joe Haig, LaRaven Clark, and Josh Andrews all play guard. You have 3 backup guards.
Right.
And Josh Andrews, and in a pinch, Joe Haig can play center.
Okay.
So you have multiple guys at each spot who can play in those spots.
Yeah, you go 3 deep.
In a pinch if you need it.
Yeah.
And so you don't necessarily need to have the extra guy that you would have elsewhere. But 8's really not that small a number. It's just small because Chris Ballard has wanted to have 9 or 10 in the past.
Yeah, and I mean, and understandably. I mean, I don't think anybody believes in building up and beefing up the front lines of both the offense and defensive side of the ball more than Ballard. He talked about that the other night. That he's going to build inside out, and that and if we're talking about depth chart, I thought one of the coolest things he said was this team, this whole coaching staff, their scouting department is obsessed with depth, obsessed with it, and I think
because there's going to be injuries. Like we're looking at the roster now, everyone's looking at it.
Yeah, we're making predictions, and
you're looking at the 53, and you're making predictions, and people are going to get hurt.
Yep.
All over the roster, there's no way to predict it. There's probably going to be one position that gets blasted more than others.
Always happens.
There's no way to predict which position that is.
Yeah.
But that's just sort of the way this goes. Like, this is the NFL attrition. There's a war of attrition here, and the more depth you have, the better equipped you are to deal with some of that.
Yeah, you look, I mean, like I said, at every position, if you said if that guy was gone, would they just be totally screwed? Maybe T.Y. Hilton. You know, they have good depth at receiver. They just don't have anybody like him. Mm-hmm. You said Marlon Mack. But I'm not necessarily sure on the offensive line if that's true, at linebacker or defensive line if that's true. I don't think it's true at corner or safety. I think they like Kari Will. I mean, it won't be as good.
So one of the moves they made that was almost a little bit surprising was they made a waiver claim this year at corner, which felt like a deep position. But the reason they did it, I think, and going off of what Chris Ballard said the other day, is Ryan Lewis, the guy they claimed off of waivers, can play special teams, and they think he can play corner. And the guy they let go, Chris Milton, is a fantastic special teamer.
Right.
But really has not played well at corner when he's been forced into action there. And if you can get somebody who can play corner in a pinch, if you get in a pinch like the Colts got in against New England last year,
right,
it helps. It's better for you. And so that's kind of what he's talking about with building the depth is you have to expect bad things to happen and try to find as many answers as possible. And I know the flip side is some people are going to say, well, some of these backups aren't starting caliber. Well, yeah.
Well, of course. If you have 53 starters.
No one has 53 starters.
You're winning the Super Bowl.
The Patriots don't have it. They just have a bunch of guys that they know how to use in certain ways.
Right.
So I think that matters. And admittedly, I don't know any of the other AFC South teams as well as I do the Colts. But I don't feel like those other teams have the depth that the Indianapolis does.
I think you're probably right. I mean, I think we've seen we've seen that play out with some of the trades that the Houston is making for sure. Yeah, Tennessee is a bit more of a mystery. We'll see what that is. But by the way, for the record, I have them at 9-7. I have them making the playoffs as a wild card team. I believe Houston is the division winner there for a second straight year. But we'll see how that goes. We were going to talk about quarterbacks, but let's save that for the end because I think we can segue better into predictions. I have them beating the Chargers this week. I think they can steal one. You have them losing against the Chargers this week. You go first. Why don't you think the Colts can steal one despite the injuries that San Diego? There, I did it. I knew I was going to do it. Los Angeles has this weekend.
Well, honestly, they should still be in San Diego. I think most reasonable people would agree with that.
Can you tell people about the stadium we're about to go visit? Because I think they're going to be interested in that.
Yeah, so that's okay. So I've covered 2 games. I've covered 2 preseason games to me, it's the StubHub Center. I know it's now like Dignity Health Sports Park or something like that.
It's a soccer stadium, right?
Yeah, it's a soccer stadium. It's a very weird feel. Part of the reason that they should still be in San Diego is that's where their fans were.
Usually that's where you want to play is in front of your fans. Yeah,
and in LA, I don't think it's caught. As good as the Chargers were last year, I still don't think they've caught on. The Rams are very clearly the team and that makes sense. They had a presence there. They had a fan base from back when.
Yep.
The Chargers don't. The Chargers were in San Diego for 50 years. So the way this feels, it almost feels like a spring training game. And I covered 2 preseason games. I haven't covered a regular season game, but just from watching people around the league tweet about what it's like to be at these games, I don't think it's changing any. I think there's going to be a lot of Colts fans there.
Okay.
There's going to be a lot of Colts fans who live in California and don't ever have a chance to see the team, and they're going to go to the StubHub Center because, again, the Chargers fans are in San Diego and are probably still mad that the Chargers aren't in San Diego.
Okay.
And it's small. It's real small. I can't remember what it is. But it's less than 30,000 people. So it's less than half of what most NFL stadiums are. So it's not going to be the same kind of environment that they're used to playing in.
Okay. That's weird.
It's going to feel a little bit more like you're playing an exhibition or something like that. It's a weird feeling.
Well, it's like a baseball game, right? 30,000? That sounds like... Well, I guess that's even small for a baseball field, too.
It's small for a Major League Baseball game.
Yeah,
so
you're right, yeah.
It's a weird venue. But the Chargers team, I think the Chargers team, and the reason I didn't pick the Colts was Derwin James is out, but they still have a very good secondary and a very deep secondary. Desmond King is a ball hawk who plays in the slot. He's going to take away some of those short throws. They've got great pass rushers off the edge. Joey Bosa and Melvin Ingram are fantastic. And Phillip Rivers is pretty good. And Phillip Rivers is the kind of quarterback the Colts didn't see a lot of last year. While he doesn't have Melvin Gordon in the passing game, that doesn't hurt him because Austin Eckler could always do that before.
Yeah.
I think it hurts him in the run game. But here's the thing. At this point, we can only go based off of what we saw last year. And based on what we saw last year, running games is not what hurt the Colts defense. It was teams who could throw the ball on time over the middle and complete a lot of passes down the field.
Yep.
That's Phillip Rivers. That's who Phillip Rivers is. That's the team he's got. And so between those two things, well, I think that the absence of Russell Okung and them having a backup left tackle in there is probably not going to help Phillip Rivers on Monday morning. There's stuff you can do to combat that in terms of quick throws, getting the ball out, and it just doesn't feel like a good matchup. Plus, it's really hard to play on the West Coast. It just is.
Nope, you're right. And the only reason I was thinking that might not be as big an issue because it's the first week. You're not gassed from 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 other weeks in a row or whatever, and so that West Coast trip won't hurt quite as much as it would during the season for sure. You're right, though. I mean, that's one of the things I did think about when I was making the prediction was the Colts were actually beat up by running backs that could catch the ball. They got gashed by a lot of those guys last year, and so that will be a problem for them with Austin Eckler. However, like I said, the Russell Okung thing is interesting to me. I believe in the Colts, the pass rush is going to be better, and I think they're going to have a hard time without their left tackle, without Melvin Gordon, who is actually a pretty good pass blocker. That's going to be a bit of a problem for them. Meanwhile, I think Derwin James is just like their eraser. I mean, he is the guy that can do a lot of things against the run. He's a guy who can cover tight ends. And I think Frank Reich is licking his lips right now with the idea of creating mismatch with the tight ends he have without having to deal with Derwin James. So those are the guys that That Derwin James was the big one for me. I think Reich's going to be able to find a way to pick on that defense, get the ball out of Brissett's hands very fast in order to avoid, like you said, Bosa and Melvin Ingram getting after him, because they will. They're that good. But I think he's going to be able to figure out a way to attack them and run the ball effectively.
Well, I do think that this opens things up for Eric Ebron. Derwin James is kind of like he's kind of the perfect guy to cover tight ends.
Yep.
And without him, you don't have anybody like that, because there's only like one or two of those guys in the entire
rare.
NFL. So Ebron, I think it's a big game for Ebron. I think it's a game where he's going to have some chances. And we saw that him and Jacoby have some chemistry in that Browns game on that fourth down and that absolute laser in the end zone.
Good.
So I think you're right about that. I do think Derwin James plays a role, but their secondary is pretty good elsewhere.
Yeah, Casey Hayward is the player that I know you mentioned earlier.
And it's just the Chargers are a pretty good team, and like I said, that West Coast trip just is tough. Even in the beginning of the season, I think it's tough.
Let me push you then the other way, though. So what does a loss mean for this team? Okay, let's go with two different ways. A close loss versus a big loss. What happens after a big loss? Do they panic with the Brissett thing? Maybe not the team, but I guess outside media maybe. We go, oh crap.
Oh, I think if it's a big loss, I think people will give up. Not inside the Colts locker room.
Right.
This is the same. This is mostly the same team that went 1-5 last year.
Right.
And came back to make the playoffs. So they're not going to.
Right.
But in terms of the bandwagon and people being on it or being off, if they get beat badly, I think most people are going to write them off completely.
Okay, so then the other one is a close game, a good game that they lose or win. This then validates kind of what everybody's been saying. I think what we've been saying. This is a good, deep team, and Jacoby Brissett is a capable quarterback that can lead this team to 8, 9, 10 wins.
I think that's probably the way people look at it. But the hard part is these games early in the season they're only sort of indicative of what you're going to see the rest of the way, because teams kind of have to figure themselves out a little bit. And the Colts maybe don't have to as much because they have so many guys coming back, but they're going to have to figure themselves out a little bit with Jacoby Brissett. And so there might be a chance where we're looking at a team that sort of knows what it wants to be, but isn't 100% sure yet. I think about last year, before I covered the Saints, or before I covered the Colts, I was covering the Saints, and they got absolutely riddled by Ryan Fitzpatrick in the second game.
It happens. Fitzmagic does it.
In the second game, they got absolutely destroyed by Ryan Fitzpatrick and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And you would not have thought that team was going to be the type of – you wouldn't have thought that the defense you saw that day was good enough to go to the NFC Championship game.
Yeah.
It was just the second week of the season. And so some of these early games, there's going to be some anomalies and some things that aren't going to make sense when you get deeper in the game, deeper into it. So, well, I do think there's going to be a major reaction one way or the other.
It's week one. Always is.
Based on well, even more so with Jacoby starting.
For sure.
It's probably a mistake.
Okay. Let's talk about Jacoby. Jacoby's the new starter. They brought in a new backup, Brian Hoyer, from New England. Was a guy that was pursued by a few other teams. There were some reports it was as many as 6. We know that New England was interested. He talked about it today, that New England was interested in bringing him back and keeping him there. He's a guy that's been around the league before. I know you saw some people on Twitter. I saw some people on Twitter upset about the money, upset that Brian Hoyer isn't Joe Montana. I just think that he's got some warts, but the guy has been around the NFL for a long time. Frank Reich talked about it today. The guy has played in about 6 different systems, I feel like, knows how to speak the NFL language. I don't know if he's going to be a great mentor to Jacoby. I'm not sure Jacoby maybe needs a great mentor with a guy like Frank Reich in the locker room with him, but he's a guy that's been around and will be able to give some pointers too. I mean, I don't know if you saw that story. I think it was Pro Football Talk put out last year. But Hoyer, the Patriots defense gave Hoyer a lot of credit for running the Rams scout offense during the weeks leading up to the Super Bowl, and they gave him a lot of credit for being able to do that and do that well.
Well, so one thing when it comes to the Hoyer thing, I just don't know who else people thought was available.
Joe Montana. He's out there. He's still out there.
There's not a ton of really great quarterbacks in the league. And that means there's not a ton of really great backups in the league. Jacoby was one of the few, which is why people thought the Colts had one of the best quarterback situations in the league coming into this year.
Yep.
So Yeah, it'd be great if you could have Teddy Bridgewater, but the Saints aren't giving up Teddy Bridgewater.
Nope.
Because they need him if Drew Brees goes down. It'd be great to have Tyrod Taylor, but the Chargers are not giving him up because they need him if Phillip Rivers
They
goes
paid
down.
him a lot of money to be the backup there.
And so this is what was available. And really, Hoyer, the only reason Hoyer's available is because the Patriots might have hit on a rookie quarterback.
Yeah, they fell in love with Jared Stidham.
And so it's not that Hoyer's this idea that Hoyer should have this incredible record like his whole career. If he had that, he'd be starting. But he's done it before. He clearly knows what he's doing. And honestly, when you have as much cap space as the Colts have, it really doesn't matter what they paid him. It just doesn't.
Nope. They could have given him $50 million. It really wouldn't have mattered.
It doesn't matter at all.
It's Jim Irsay. I just want to tell fans it's not your money. It's not. He's not spending money. It's Jim Irsay. It was a decision for Jim Irsay to either pay Brian Hoyer that much money or keep it in his pocket.
Well, the thing is, it would matter if he paid too much for somebody and then they couldn't sign somebody else.
Yeah, but
that's not a problem with this team, and therefore, honestly, whatever you spend is whatever you spend. It's not. We haven't seen the contract details 100% yet, but and the same thing with Brissett's extension.
Yes.
It's not going to prevent them from doing anything now or in the future. And so if it's not going to do that, there's just no reason to worry about it.
No. So Brian Hoyer is here. He's a backup quarterback, and this may be the last time we talk about Brian Hoyer. And that would be a good thing for the Colts, right?
Yeah.
Occasionally we'll bring him up and say, hey, he ran a great scout week for the defense, and they gave him credit for X, Y, and Z. Or, we talked to him about another quarterback or somebody else in the room that he knows. But most of the time, he's a backup quarterback. He will fade off into the distance unless he is called.
We'd probably ask him mostly about Jacoby.
Right. That's it. That's what I'm saying. So, again, Colts fans, assuming all things go well with Jacoby Brissett, you don't need to worry about Brian Hoyer. Whether you like him or not. I like him, but whether you like him or not, you don't need to worry about him.
And I think when it comes to Jacoby, there's an element of the unknown here.
Sure.
I know that Frank Reich has spoken glowingly about him. Chris Ballard has spoken glowingly about him. I've written stories about other people who talk glowingly about his leadership, about this magnetism that he has, about the way he can lead a team. But in terms of on the football field, we really don't know what he is. And here's the reason. Jacoby is from, the career path Jacoby is on is from a different era in terms of quarterbacks often used to get drafted and sit for a little while and develop, and then they would start later on. Now, that doesn't happen anymore. Generally, they get thrown right into the fire.
Yep.
And Jacoby sort of got thrown into the fire. He played 2 games with the Patriots. He started a whole season with the Colts. But he's had 2 years now to actually develop. And this is what people always talk about is what's it like if you can actually give a quarterback time to develop. And we're going to get to see whether or not Jacoby Brissett is what Frank Reich thinks he is and what Chris Ballard thinks he is and what the Colts think he is and what the Patriots who played with him think he is. But I did think I went to Foxborough for a story on Brissett that's on IndyStar.com, and I thought the most interesting quote in terms of what it means for Jacoby Brissett this year is that Devin McCourty said there was a video last year that one of the broadcast stations did, and they basically talked to all of Tom Brady's backups. And McCourty, for those of you who don't know the Patriots that well, Devin McCourty is basically the most consistent player on that defense for the last almost a decade.
He's been there forever, yeah. Longer than most.
And that's on a defense that doesn't keep people around.
Right.
So he knows everybody that's come through here. He's played in a ton of Super Bowls. And he said he texted Jacoby and said, "Don't ever let me see you in a video with a bunch of backups. That's not your life." And I thought that was really indicative. There's Devin McCourty is close to Jacoby Brissett, but he's also a guy who's been around the league. And he clearly believes that Jacoby Brissett is more than just a backup.
Yeah.
We're going to find out what he's got this year because this is the kind of roster and system that'll play to him and that he's been in. He's not thrown into it in the fire. But we'll see if all of this belief that everybody has in him bears itself out.
I think it's fair. I mean, I think it's fair for people, for Colts fans to be skeptical based on what they saw in 2017. I don't think he was bad in 2017, but he obviously wasn't a game winner or somebody that. Mm-hmm. But again, I think you've pointed this out before, and we've pointed it out in stories you've written. He just hasn't played in. He's never played in a Frank Reich offense. He's never played with this kind of supporting cast, this offensive line in front of him. He's never played with this much experience behind him. This is a whole different version of Jacoby Brissett. Actually, I think someone asked Nick Sirianni yesterday what he learned from 2017, and he kind of laughed, I think, and he was just kind of
that was interesting too. Nick Sirianni basically said nothing.
Like
he said he hasn't looked at it in a really long time.
Yeah. I mean, and it's weird because Reich came in and said, I watched that tape and knew that he was a top 20 quarterback and worked with him. And Sirianni said, I think maybe the question was more, what can you learn and apply to now? Mm-hmm. And I think he pretty much said nothing. Like, this is a different system. It's totally different. Mm-hmm. Everything else is different. So, like you said, we're going to be waiting and seeing who the true Jacoby Brissett is. And for the Colts, they protected themselves with this contract, I think. And I think you wrote this as a win-win for them and for Jacoby. He gets paid, obviously, a lot more money. Mm-hmm. I think it's, I don't know, what do we find, the
$20 million guaranteed.
Yeah, and $15 million this year, I believe? Or is it something like that?
Something like that.
He got a significant raise because he was making $2 million this year. He's making $13 million now, and he got essentially one extra year added to his contract. It's an interesting contract for me because I think Jacoby gets paid like a starter. I think you wrote in your story he's 19th highest paid quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Frank Reich said he's a top 20 quarterback, so that makes a degree of sense. He's paid like a starter. He's not paid less than his backup, which was the case for about 6 or 7 hours there that we knew about. And for the Colts, it protects them in two ways. One, if he's really good, they're not facing a franchise tag of $25 million that they don't want to pay. They also have control of him for another year. They can negotiate that next deal if they want. So they don't have to. And then the other thing is if he's terrible, which nobody in this building thinks that's going to happen, but if he's terrible, they can get out of that contract with ease is really the way.
Again, they have a ton of cap space.
Exactly. So if they had to cut $5
now
million,
and in the future, and if they had to take a dead money hit of whatever it is, it's not going to hurt them that bad.
No.
And so I think that's an important thing to remember. The team also could have played this out. They really could have. They could have just seen what they had and then just walked away with no financial implication. But that's not really – it doesn't really feel like the way they've done business. They gave Mark Lewinsky an extension after kind of half a year of starting. Kenny Moore had a really good year last year, and they extended him. I think they believe in their guys, and they try to reward them. I think they also build in something on the back end where if something goes bad, they can get out. But – this is sort of this team's modus operandi. I do think you could have, if you wanted to, said, you know what, we got to see it, and not signed him.
Yeah.
But that's just not the way this team has been operating under Ballard.
I think Jacoby could have said, now I'm going to bet on myself.
He could have, but it's really hard if you've made, I think it's something like, he's around $3.5 million.
Yeah, something like that.
On his first contract. It's really hard to do that if you got $20 million guaranteed.
I agree. I wouldn't turn it down.
Offered to you, because you could bet on yourself, but you could also fail and not get that money.
Right.
You could bet and lose. And the other thing is, this doesn't necessarily preclude him from getting the big contract. Yeah. He's only 26.
Right.
If he plays really well and leads into the playoffs, we're probably back in a much bigger extension next year.
Oh, for sure.
And he's got all the money he could have had. So, in a way, signing a 2-year deal is sort of betting on himself a little bit.
Yeah. I get it. I think if we're talking about Pro Bowler Jacoby Brissett or playoff quarterback Jacoby Brissett, you and I are at one podcast or writing a story about a Jacoby Brissett extension.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's worth. And I think you cited this in your story. Maybe somewhere in the Nick Foles range, maybe more because he's younger. But of that 4 years, and was it $80 million? I think, and 45 guaranteed. 88. I think 45
4
guaranteed.
Years, 88, 45 guaranteed.
Yeah, and I think that's not unreasonable for Jacoby if he has a good year. I think maybe, like I said, because he's younger, he might get more.
Yeah, and I know there's going to be some people out there who are like, well, that's crazy amount for a quarterback. It's not anymore.
No.
It's not anymore. Just about like all the guys below him are kind of on their rookie deals. Anybody who's been a starter in the league for any amount of time and gotten to a second contract is making over $20 million now. That's just where we are.
That's how it works. When quarterbacks come up, like I think wasn't like Joe Flacco was the highest paid quarterback in the NFL after he won a Super Bowl, but
right,
he was because his contract came up. Andy Dalton was one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL because Cincinnati said, "Okay, you're our starter. Here you go." And
that's just the way it is.
It's just the cycle of how it goes. Now, guys like Aaron Rodgers will pretty consistently be the highest paid guy, and I'm pretty sure Kansas City will just give part ownership to Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, I don't know what they're going to do with that. I don't know what they're going to do with that.
It's going to be a silly amount of money.
but that's just the way it goes.
Yeah, that's how it works with quarterback contracts.
And it seems like they're giving him. I know it probably seems like they're giving him this carte blanche vote of confidence, but it's not really. It's not. It's using their cap space they have now to reward him for what he's about to do and what he has done for them.
Yes.
And getting them a bridge to seeing what they're going to do.
You wrote in your story that they're putting their money where their mouths were, and I thought that was important, not only for fans, but for the locker room a little bit. I really do think that, and again, I think most of this locker room believes in Jacoby Brissett already, but they say, hey, they're giving him $20 million guaranteed. They're making him, he's our guy. He's the face of the franchise now. That's who he is, and the team clearly believes that. That's a vote of confidence, I think, inside the locker room to say, okay, this guy isn't just a backup.
Well, I think it would be a mistake to underestimate the impact of salary in an NFL locker room.
Yeah, okay.
Players know who's making money. They just do.
Yeah.
And they know what it represents sometimes. And so giving a guy a contract like this is a message to the locker room and saying we do believe in him to some degree, even if there is a possible out after this year. Just because players know, like I said, players know what other guys are making and what that means in terms of their hierarchy in the league. That's why it's important for people to get out there that Kenny Moore is the highest paid slot corner when he signs that deal, because you're trying to send a message like in terms of, for a player, it's an actual number value placed on your worth. Yeah. And so I think players in the locker room know that and see that.
I also think there's that benefit, right? Like of Colts players, when they're talking about re-signing their own guys, when they're talking to free agents, these agents know, and they can tell these guys, hey, you perform, and they take care of you. That's what they do. That's what they do in this organization, and you're rewarded for your good work. And so I think that probably carries some weight into the future as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I feel like we're almost to the end of all this off-season stuff now.
I know. I was walking out to practice today. I'm like,
very close.
It's game week.
Yeah.
Kind of weird.
There'll be an actual game played. The starters will play all of it. We won't have to worry about who's playing or not playing.
Oh, my God. The starters are going to play all the game. I'm so excited. I haven't seen that in a while.
In fact, we're recording this on Wednesday. There will be NFL football on tomorrow.
I'm going to watch.
A real NFL game.
It's my hometown team playing tomorrow. I'll be interested.
It's technically my hometown team playing, but not the same one as yours.
Yeah. So are we at odds tomorrow? Is that
technically
okay?
Based on
where we grew up,
our previous selves are at odds.
All right. Well, I'll be texting you tomorrow during the Bears-Packers game.
Past Joel and past Jim are at odds.
Okay. Well, I'm going to
current Joel and current Jim spend most of their time paying attention to the Colts.
It's true, but past Jim's going to tell you that Khalil Mack's going to eat Aaron Rodgers. Just so you know, that's past Jim speaking, not current Jim. Just want you to be clear. Past
Jim didn't have Khalil Mack on his team.
No, the Bears were not great when I was a kid. We had Rex Grossman. It was fun. I'm giving you one last chance before we end this thing. You picked the Chargers to win 27-24. You're sticking with it?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
And again, I say that and fully telling the listener, I don't like making predictions.
You can make a prediction the week of.
I can, and I still don't have to like it.
Okay. But you can feel more comfortable.
Because here's the other thing, and I'm going to say this many times on the podcast, so people who listen to this podcast a lot will get used to it.
Okay.
The NFL makes no sense week to week. It just doesn't. There's a lot of games where you're like sitting there. This happens to me every week in the press box, and it's going to annoy you because I pay attention to it. Like, that I'm just sitting there going, how in the hell is that team winning?
Yeah.
Like, that's just how the NFL is, and that's why I don't like doing it. Like, the Kansas City playoff game last year. You
just don't like being wrong? Is that what it is?
No, I don't know. The prediction thing just doesn't. The great thing about sports to me is that you don't have to guess. It just happens. This thing just happens in front of you, and it's sort of better if you don't think it's coming. And so, like, trying to figure out what's coming or guessing that way, it's just not the same as actually, like, dealing with what happens, which is always great.
Taking it in, I don't know. I take a great satisfaction in saying something's going to happen and then it does. That makes me feel.
Well, okay, so like I didn't have trouble making a 53-man roster projection because that wasn't based on nothing. That was based on like evidence.
What? I agree, but
it was based on what I saw on the practice field.
And I'll get you week 17 against the Jaguars. We got nothing to go on. I completely agree. Nothing. But week 1 against the Chargers, you got about as much information as you're going to get.
Yeah, and I just it's not enough.
Chicken. He's chicken. Anyway,
I just don't like them.
I'll talk. I'll say yeah. I was gonna say we'll talk about point spreads and no, I'm just kidding. We won't do that because Joel cried.
Betting is a suckers. Betting on the NFL is a suckers game.
Colts are +7. They're underdogs this week. I don't get it.
Suckers game.
It's too big a number. Anyway, that was. Oh, we should tell them right before. We're gonna do a podcast after the game.
Yes.
On Sunday.
First blush reaction.
Yeah, we'll do something fun like that. This one will probably be up in the morning, so you download it, listen on your way to work. The reason it'll be up in the morning is because, as you guys all know, this is a West Coast game. It's going to be pretty late by the time we do interviews, we write stories, we'll record the podcast. You can probably listen to it at night, but you'll also probably be sleeping. So download it in the morning, listen to it, get your Colts fix in, and then we'll have stories for you to read the next week.
Yep. The regular season is here.
It's here. I'm so excited. Go Bears. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Join us again Sunday.